Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
I've talked a bit about debt collectors, and debt collectors are the people who get hired by people who are owed money, and they'll often sell them the debt and say, this person owes me money, I'm sick of this, you go get the debt, and you can either keep it all or I'll pay you to go get it. A couple different ways it can work, but debt collectors are third parties who go to collect a debt that you owe to somebody else. So debt collectors are an entire profession out there, but there are laws that govern their behavior, both the state and the federal law. Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is a federal statute that addresses how debt collectors must behave when attempting to collect a debt from a person. I know attorneys who specialize in these cases, and I've talked about this before, and I've had people say, Steve, if you pay your debts, you won't have a problem. So this is stupid. And I like to point out that debt collectors will often go so far beyond the pale that when you hear what they do, you're like, okay, that does seem a little bit wrong. But also, they often go after people who don't owe the money. So heaven forbid you've got a common name. To all my Jim Smiths in the audience, I apologize for using you as an example again, but if your name is, Jim Smith, and you lived in some town where another Jim Smith lived, it's quite possible that you could be chased for the other Jim Smith's debt. And depends on what they do to try to recover that debt, as whether or not they break the law. But there are situations that happen. And so I've got, like I said, friends who do this. And every time I talk to them, I said, give me some more stories. And I hear these crazy stories about things debt collectors do. And it's often threats they make. They often threaten people. Now, not all debt collectors do, but some do. And as with most professions, it's the ones who give us all a bad name who are often in the minority. They're not all the debt collectors, but the ones that behave badly give you all a bad name. So, the Federal Trade Commission just announced that phantom debt collectors permanently banned from the industry in an FTC settlement. There's a lot going on here. Defendants threatened consumers with lawsuits and arrest while trying to collect non-existent debts. So they'd actually tell someone, you're going to be arrested if you don't pay this debt. A group of phantom debt collectors will be permanently banned from the debt collection industry and required to surrender the contents of numerous bank and investment accounts under the terms of a settlement with the Federal Trade Commission. So some people, when I tell them that some outcome has occurred, people go, well, that's not fair. Well, here, the people in the story, the debt collectors, have agreed to do what the Federal Trade Commission suggested should be done to them. They've stipulated this, so this is not unfair. The FTC's complaint against South Carolina-based National Landmark Logistics was filed in July of 2020. It alleged that the defendants in the case used robocalls to leave deceptive messages claiming that consumers faced imminent legal action, lawsuits, and arrest for unpaid debts. And it is illegal to lie to somebody who's a debtor, and especially about things like imminent legal action or that you're going to be arrested for an unpaid debt. So when consumers returned the calls, the defendants falsely claimed to be from a mediation or a law firm, another violation, and again threatened legal action and used consumers' personal information to convince consumers the threats were real. The defendants turned around and pocketed the money, despite the fact that in many instances, consumers did not owe the debt being collected or the defendants had no right to collect it. So there were examples in here where they're chasing the wrong person. So this bit about, oh, Steve, you just pay your debts, otherwise you're just complaining. No, they were chasing people who didn't owe the money. And when they say they had no right to collect it, they're probably chasing debts that are older than 6 years. Statute of limitations on debt in most states is 6 years. Under the terms of the settlement, National Landmark Logistics, LLC, National Landmark Service of United Recovery, LLC, Silver Lake Landmark Recovery Group, LLC, and Gene Celent will be permanently banned from debt collection of any kind. They will also be banned from buying or selling debt, from making any misrepresentations to consumers about any goods or services, including claiming they are lawyers or representing a law firm. And as you can imagine, when you get a phone call that says, hi, I'm calling you from such and such law firm, and we're about to sue you, that sounds more ominous if they really are calling from a law firm. If they're not calling from a law firm, of course, that's a misrepresentation that's been made. You'll also notice that there's 1, 2, 3 different LLCs there with very, very similar sounding names. And what those are is just corporate shells that once they, outrun their purpose, They just yank the plug on it and walk away from it. It's not like this is a huge corporation with thousands of employees and a huge physical location someplace. The settlement also includes a monetary judgment of $12 million, which is partially suspended due to an inability to pay. Now, that's something I disagree with 100%. Because as you can imagine, the fact that they can't pay their debts shouldn't allow them to get their debts forgiven is so ironic that I don't know if I need to point this out to you. But I personally also think that if there's a fine that's levied against somebody and the fine is appropriate for what they're accused of doing, you don't forgive the fine because they can't pay it. We hear about this all the time where fines are levied against people because they did really, really bad things. When was the last time you heard somebody say, oh, but they can't pay it, never mind? Never mind. No! So here it is, a $12 million debt, which is partially suspended due to an inability to pay. I say we take the one person who's named here and put him in a room with a phone that rings 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if they ever answer it to make it stop ringing, a voice comes on the line and goes, you owe me $12 million. And do that until they pay the $12 million. They also have to turn over title to property and bank and investment accounts located in Philadelphia and a Mercedes SL 550. But then it says, or the cash value of those assets. Well, if they've got both the assets and the cash, why not surrender them both? Because they're still short on the $12 million payment. If the defendants are found to have misrepresented their financial status, the full amount of the monetary judgment would become immediately due. The FTC previously announced settlements with other defendants in this case in March 2021. The commission vote approving the stipulated order was 5-0. The FTC filed a proposed order in the U.S. District Court for the District of South Carolina. And Federal Trade Commission does work to promote competition, stop deceptive and unfair business practices and scams, and educate consumers. And I highly recommend that you go to their site, ftc.gov. If you've been defrauded, you can report it there. Business dealings, you can report there also. It's what they do. And you should note, and they note right here in the press release, stipulated final orders or injunctions, etc., have the force of law when approved and signed by the district court judge. So the judge hadn't signed off on this yet, but should be any minute now. But the important thing here is it is a stipulated order. And so when there is a dispute, whether it's criminal or civil, the two parties can get together and say, we agree on how to resolve this matter. So in a lawsuit, it is often a settlement agreement. So I sue somebody, say they owe me money. They might even countersue me saying something else. And we sit down and we iron out our differences. We don't have to have a trial. We can agree to resolve our differences in the form of a settlement and take it to court and say, we all agree to this. And the court will look at that, and generally speaking, as long as it's not like a fraud on society or some kind of scam that we're both colluding on, that the court will say, okay, you guys settled the lawsuit? Great. Get it off the docket. Boom, rubber stamp it and get it out of here. And most settlements between parties are approved that way. If there's a minor party, for instance, sometimes they'll poke around a little bit more to make sure it's fair, make sure everyone's looking out for the right interests of the correct people. But as you can imagine, criminal cases can also be resolved. And criminal cases are usually resolved with plea agreements, where somebody says, hey, I'll plead guilty to this if you drop that charge there, and they work out some kind of agreement. And they'll often not use the word stipulated there. They'll just say it's a plea agreement. But a stipulation is just any time that the parties agree to something and tell the court, we've agreed to this. Our agreement, the stipulation, is an agreement that both parties have met that appears to resolve something. So a lot of times when I had lawsuits that ended with a settlement, the last order that gets entered is a stipulated order of dismissal, where the parties agree to dismiss the case and say, this is the end of this case, the final order of this case can be closed. We both agree to it, we sign it, and we send it to the court. The court looks at it, generally speaking, and rubber stamps it. And they almost always do. So the fact that the parties here, which are the 3 LLCs and the one named individual, stipulated to this order that says they can no longer conduct business this way or even conduct business at all as a debt collector appears to be pretty severe. And it also appears that it might shut down quite a bit of activity here. But of course, many people know that once you know how to do this and if it works, You just find somebody else to do it for you, and you kind of consult. I'm not saying it's what's going to happen here, but that's what I'd be on the lookout for if I was a Fed in this field. I'd try to keep an eye on some of these players to make sure they're not getting back into it. Because one of the reasons that these companies exist is they make so much money doing it. So if it's lucrative, it'll attract people. And sometimes it attracts people who are prone to breaking federal law. So this all came from a press release from the FTC.gov website. Brian Parker sent it to me. Brian's a good friend of mine who does debt collection work. And phantom debt collectors permanently banned from industry in FTC settlement. Defendants threatened consumers with lawsuits and arrests while trying to collect from non-existent debts. And some of the people didn't owe the money, and sometimes it was the wrong people, and these things happen. So there you go. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Anyone who says sunshine brings happiness has never danced in the rain.